Okay, I'm here with Alexander Mercouris, editor-in-chief of the Duran. Alexander, we are going to show a video from the EU Parliament. I think this one's dated March 27th or 28th was when this happened, this Parliament session. The first part we'll see the Belgian representative. He's pretty much a mainstay in the EU Parliament, Guy Verhofstadt. He's been there since 2009. I mean, he's an EU technocrat through and through. And in the latter part of the video, we'll listen to Nigel Farage. This was a pretty incredible exchange between the two gentlemen. I want you to comment as to what they said. I made some very simple notes. Verhofstadt said that the place for Britain is inside the EU, maybe not now, but later. Verhofstadt mentioned the 1 million person march, mentioned the petition of 6 million people. So Britain belongs in the EU was his overall summary. And I made some notes as to what Farage says. He says that the treaty is very much like the Treaty of Versailles. He says that there's the 39 billion he mentioned, which is reparations, the annexation of land, which is Northern Ireland. So I mean, Farage, in his excellent orator skills that he has, he pretty much laid out. But Alexander, give us your thoughts as to this video, and then when you're done, we'll play the video for our viewers.
Yes. I mean, the first thing to say is that to me, what it shows, which shows many things, but if we speak specifically talk about Nigel Farage, it shows the quickness and agility of his mind, and also his very profound understanding of European politics, in which he is far ahead of most of the members of the British political class. Now, if we go first to Verhofstadt, I mean, this is a completely standard, orthodox EU position. I mean, the British are basically, from his point of view, they're foolish to want to leave. He gives mangled comments about British history. He talks about Field Marshal Haig, very unwise thing to do. He talks about Winston Churchill, extremely unwise thing to do, very provocative things to do. He gets his history wrong in various places, but we won't go into that in detail. And of course, what he really is saying is that the heroes in Britain are the Remainers, and that they will eventually prevail in this great slugfest, which is happening within the Conservative Party, which he entirely blames for this Brexit debacle as he sees it. It's not a very clear or coherent speech, but it's quite clear what the direction is. The Remainers are the heroes. The Leavers, who are the Conservatives, are the villains. Farage, who isn't leading his protesters, is somehow a villain, and also in some sort of a coward also.
Yeah, missing in action kind of.
Missing in action sort of thing, which is a very foolish thing to say if you really understand British politics well. And ultimately, the real destiny of Britain is as a member of Europe and of the European Union. And what happens is that Farage, and as I said, he's very quick. He takes all of these things. He responds very quickly to Verhofstadt's comments about Field Marshal Haig, points out that Haig was the general who led Britain to victory in the First World War and liberated Belgium. Well, some people might find that a rather elastic discussion of history, but nonetheless, it's a point well made, because Haig did lead the British Army at the end of the First World War. And he makes the point about the withdrawal agreement being the one the EU has agreed with Theresa May, and on which it is insisting as the product of a failure like Britain's failure in the First World War, to capitalize on its victory. So he leads directly from Haig to the outcome of the First World War. He brings up the Treaty of Versailles. He brings up the subject of reparations. It was Germany that had to pay reparations after the First World War, but there are lots of Germans in the audience. It's Britain that's now being asked to pay 39 billion pounds to the EU for the benefit of leaving. He talks about the annexation of British territory. And of course, what he's referring to is the backstop and separate customs arrangements for Northern Ireland. Again, that is clearly directed at the Germans, who know their history very well and understand exactly what he means about the annexations of national territory, which were part of the Versailles Treaty. He says, importantly, that this treaty will not pass, and he ends with, I think, one of the most intelligent and clever statements about, do you really want us, that is to say Britain, and people like me, still in the EU? Do you want to have us as a defeated country inside the EU, angry, constantly manoeuvring to leave, divided, and with people like me still pursuing Brexit? Now, he says that, Farage says that, with a very clear understanding that, of course, there are people within the EU, led by Emmanuel Macron, who is the president of France, who I have described as the EU hardliners, who actually now want Britain to leave, and want Britain to leave sooner rather than later, because they want to press ahead with their integrationist project in the EU, and they understand that a Britain inside the EU, an angry Britain, is going to actually obstruct that process. So what Farage is basically saying to those EU hardliners like Macron is, stand firm. Don't be persuaded by any proposals for a long extension or a softer Brexit that comes from the British over the course of this week, from the British government or from the British House of Commons. It is not in your long-term interests to do so. Vote for a no-deal Brexit. Throw Britain out. Give us what we want and push ahead with your integrationist project, which you can better do without us. I don't think any other British leader has shown such an intelligent understanding of the dynamics of EU policy and of the EU and of the conflicts within the EU as Nigel Farage showed in that response that he made to Verhofstadt. It was made in addition with Juncker and Donald Tusk present and listening, and of course,
Tusk's face is priceless.
Absolutely, absolutely. And of course, the Germans, as I said, are also there listening and digesting all the points about Versailles. But the people who these comments are mainly addressed to, as I said, are the EU hardliners who are led by France, but who are now clearly being supported increasingly by Spain, which is also increasingly aligning behind France and Macron on this issue. So it shows, to my mind, what a sophisticated politician Nigel Farage is. I realise this isn't a view that many people have, but you only have to see this speech there. And it shows also that the true leader of Brexit, that the Brexit movement in Britain, is not Boris Johnson or Jacob Rees-Mogg or David Davis or any of these people in the House of Commons and the Conservative Party who made such a complete hash of things over the last 3 years. It is Nigel Farage. It is a tragedy that he is not in the British Parliament arguing his case there as effectively as he is arguing it in the European Parliament. And if he had been in the British Parliament leading UKIP as he had been previously, it would have made, in my opinion, a huge difference to the political developments that we're seeing.
Well, here is Nigel Farage in the video fighting for the UK's independence all the way until the end. He is not giving up. That's a good side. And like you said, it's a great video. Guys, let us know what you think. Here's the video. Let us know in the comments down below. If you like everything, smash that like button. Subscribe to our channel. Share the channel with everybody you know. Duran Shop. pick up a shirt. Really helps us out. You can donate to us on PayPal and Patreon. Alexander, let's check out Nigel Farage at his best.
Grazie. La parola al Presidente del Gruppo Liberale, Guy Verhofstadt.
First of all, I want to say to Mr. Legutko that there is absolutely wrong what he is saying, that there is a sense of humiliation or punishment from the side of the European Union towards Britain. We have far too much respect for a great nation as Britain to do that. You know what the problem is? The problem of humiliation and punishment is because of the mess in the Tory party. There is the humiliation of the British people. Sitting in your group, they are not even there. They are not even there. The only who is there is Mr. Farage. That's a surprise for me because I thought that he was marching somewhere in Britain. And he is here. A 200 miles march. How many miles you have done? 2 miles, you think? Something like that? Yeah, think so. You remind me more and more, I don't know if you know him, Field Marshal Hay in Blackadder. You know Field Marshal Hay in Blackadder? He was also sitting in the First World War in his office in London, and you're sitting here in Strasbourg, where your own people are marching to the rain and in the cold. That is the way you're taking your responsibility. Okay, but I want to recall the words of Winston Churchill, who said, if I may quote him, "Success is the ability to go from one failure to another with no loss of enthusiasm." I think that is a quote of Winston Churchill was absolutely applicable today to British politics, the House of Commons and the Prime Minister May. Because this afternoon, dear colleagues, in the House of Commons, if the Speaker allows it, because that's their system, there will no less than 16 options on the table for a Brexit. So there is certainly no loss of enthusiasm, as in the quote of Winston Churchill. But more seriously, after all the negative votings of the last 2 weeks in the House of Commons, Mr. Tusk, against the deal, against the no deal, against the second referendum, and so on, I think there is maybe light at the end of the tunnel now, because with the approval of the Letwin amendment, there will be, for the first time, after 2 years of negotiation, maybe a solution based on a cross-party cooperation between Labour and the Conservatives, because I believe that such an existential issue as the Brexit can only be decided on a cross-party agreement in a parliament, as we do here in this European Parliament. And I hope that the way forward, giving them time until the 11th of April, will see a majority in the House of Commons for one of these options between Remainers, reasonable Brexiteers, because it's between them that they have to find a way forward. In any way, in my personal opinion, I'm not counting on the hard Brexiteers, because for the hard Brexiteers, it's not the interest of the country which is important, but the power struggle inside the Conservative Party, as we have seen the last days. And I repeat in that respect, and I think that I can say that, Mr. Chairman, Mr. President, in the name of the whole European Parliament, that we are open to have this agreement with Britain, that we are open to change the political declaration in 2 senses. First of all, in the way that we can make it more binding for both parties than only a declaration. And secondly, that we can put inside this political declaration a far more intense relationship between the EU and the UK than the relationship that is foreseen in the political declaration at this moment. And I think this deep relationship will also, to respond to your last intervention, Mr. Tusk, will be in any way also the seed for the future. Because I'm pretty sure that not now, I'm not so optimistic as you, I'm an optimist, but not so optimistic as you. I'm personally of the opinion that not now, but within a few generations, there will be the return of Britain inside the family of European nations. That's the place of Britain, to be inside the European Union, not outside the European Union. But that will not be succeeded now. That will be succeeded later on, and the seed is, yeah, let's be honest, the march of 1 million people in London, the petition of 6 million people a few days ago. And then finally, my last point on the rights of the citizens. I think, Mr. Barnier and Mr. Juncker, I know there has been a unilateral commitment by Britain to respect these citizens as described in the withdrawal agreement. There is from you also, to Mr. Barclay, a unilateral commitment to do exactly the same for the UK citizens living on the continent. Well, I think it's time now to look into the possibilities, together with Mr. Barclay and you and both houses, to see how we can formalise that the fastest as possible, so that in any case what's happened, even when the most stupid thing happens, for example of a no deal, at least these citizens are not the victims of all these games that we have seen the last 2 years. Thank you.
You would know that it was Field Marshal Haig in 1914 who saved the Belgian town of Ypres from German domination, who then went on in 1918 to lead Britain in its greatest ever military feat, defeating Imperial Germany on the Western Front. Far from mocking Haig, as a Belgian, he should be a great hero to you. But never mind, maybe that sums up your anti-Britishness. Sticking with Belgium, I thought what happened at the summit last week was a national humiliation, an impasse, because we have in Mrs May a Prime Minister who hasn't got the courage, who hasn't got the vision to carry out her many repeated promises, namely to take us out of the European Union this Friday, March the 29th. It is not happening, and we're witnessing a slow motion betrayal, perhaps the greatest betrayal of any democratic vote in the history of our nation. And the reason, of course, is this withdrawal treaty. And I'll go back to the First World War. We won the war, but we had the Treaty of Versailles, and this treaty is the modern day equivalent. We have a reparations bill of £39 billion we have to pay for nothing in return. We have the annexation of a part of our national territory in the shape of Northern Ireland. This treaty is a bad piece. It is unacceptable, it is not Brexit, and it will not pass. Now, I know that you're all getting terribly excited about what the House of Commons may do over the course of the next week, and we know what they'll do. They'll come back with some form of agreement around a customs union and the continued free movement of people. But even if they do that, the one thing that's inevitable is that we're headed for an Article 50 extension. And I think you should ask yourselves, do you really want that? Do you really want Brexit to utterly dominate the next couple of years of your business to the exclusion of your many other ambitions? Do you really want the United Kingdom to contest the European elections, to send back a very large number of Leave MEPs just at a time when you're fighting populism as you see it across the continent? Do you really want me back in this place?
Yes.
Well, there we are. And all for what? Because Brexit is going to happen anyway. Mr Tusk, if you think the British people have changed their minds on Brexit, you, sir, are deluded. Because actually what we now see are opinion poll leads of 15 and in some cases nearly 20% in favour of leaving. If we had another referendum, Leave would win it by a bigger margin. So why put yourselves through years of agony? I pay great tribute to Mr Juncker, to Mr Barnier, to the European Commission. You have prepared your no-deal scenario. It is highly professional. It shows that actually leaving with no deal is not going to cause huge disruption. It even suggests that with no deal, there's no need for a visible border in Ireland. So I would say to you, to all of you and national leaders, reject the British extension beyond the 12th of April. Get Britain out, and then we can all just get on with the rest of our lives.